Yeah, good evening to all of you.
Good evening, sir.
Okay, now it is,
Good evening, sir.
yeah, good evening.
Good evening, sir.
Yeah, good evening, Pankaj. Fine, so let us proceed then. All right, so where were we yesterday in our class? क्या हम डिस्कस कर रहे थे कल? Budgeting.
At zero-based budgeting, sir. It was
Okay,
completed.
okay. So zero-based budgeting was done.
Yes, sir.
All right, all right. ठीक है. Now see, now I'm going to discuss the last dimension of the budgeting system reform. All right, and as I discussed with all of you that whatever reforms that India actually had introduced in the system of budgeting, it was mainly influenced by the American budgeting system. And even after 1991, when India went for the economic reform and the LPG policy, even after that, there were certain minor reforms introduced in the budgeting system. For example, the performance budgeting system was redesigned into performance programming budgeting system. So, in other words, the idea was that on the basis of a program and its outcome or its achievement, in fact, the budgeting system was designed in 1993. Fine. So that was a minor reform that was introduced. However, a major reform in the system of budgeting was only introduced in the year 2004. All right. And this 2004 was a landmark year as far as the new concept of budgeting system that was introduced in India that is called as outcome budgeting system. All right. So today we have to discuss the outcome budgeting system. So I'm sharing with all of you the green screen. Now, see, outcome budgeting system. As the name itself indicates, that under this budgeting system, the outcome became more important than the outlays. Outcome became more important than the outlays. So it simply means that whatever you used to spend, whatever we used to spend upon different areas of, you can say, a portfolio, different areas of economic activities, that expenditure was not so important. Rather, the outcome of that, now that became more important in the outcome budgeting system. In other words, in a very simplistic term, if I have to tell you, it is simply in the context of it started focusing upon more upon, in fact, the effectiveness of the budgetary proposal in India for the first time. Now, earlier we were talking about the efficiency on the expenditure allocated under the budgetary system. So now the focus has turned out to be on effectiveness in the budgeting system, and that is how the outcome budgeting is different from the earlier budgeting systems. All right. So it focused more upon the effectiveness. So the larger idea is that what is the difference between efficiency and effectiveness? All right. So see, the difference between efficiency and effectiveness can easily be understood in one sort of example that effectiveness talks about the actual result, the actual achievement. Efficiency talks about the potential of a particular expenditure. But on the other hand, effectiveness, it actually focuses more upon the result. All right. So effectiveness is all about result oriented budgeting system. So now the focus of the government actually it became upon, or rather it transformed upon the more upon the result oriented, achievement oriented budgeting system. All right, result oriented or achievement oriented budgeting system. Fine, not upon the potential, or the so-called, you can say, the performance oriented budgeting system. So it is not about only performance, it is all about what is your result after your performance. All right. So you may have given 100%, but still you have not been able to achieve what you wanted to achieve. That is actually the effectiveness. Fine. So that is what actually became a very important dimension of outcome budgeting system in India. And definitely this outcome budgeting system was indigenously developed concept in India for the first time. So it is one of the examples which is understood to be an indigenously developed concepts in India, of course, after 1991. In fact, in the entire history of budgeting system, it was one of the most important concept that was introduced in India, which was based upon the local concept, which was based upon the local idea. That is reason why it is called as indigenously developed concept of budgeting system in India. Fine. So the point is, why was it introduced in 2004? Why in 2004? Now, see, why in 2004? Because of various reasons. Now, one of the reasons is that definitely in 2002, 2003, the government of India actually had launched a very ambitious program that is called as Bharat Nirman Yojana. Bharat Nirman Yojana. Now, it was one of the most ambitious programs of the government of India, all right, which got started from 2002. Now, this Bharat Nirman Yojana actually had got allocation of rupees 1,76,000 crore to be spent upon the Bharat Nirman Yojana. Now, this sum of money was a huge sum of money, and of course, to give it a proper direction and to monitor its expenditure in the proper way, there was a need to monitor it. There was a need to, of course, provide a kind of, you can say, protection of this huge amount of money from getting leaked out, from getting, let's say, to stop the any possible corruption, any possible embezzlement of funds in the government, in the bureaucracy or in the government system. So, of course, to check that, this particular concept of outcome budgeting was introduced in the year 2004. Fine. That is how this particular concept actually came out in India. At the same time, the government of India realized that there has been such a problem in India, especially in the context of the rising level of inequality in this country. So, rising level of or degree of inequality between the urban and rural area, the urban and rural India. Now, that was also one of the major concerns of this particular budgeting system. All right, so urban rural India divide was increasing, which is basically known as divide between India and Bharat. So the division between India and Bharat was increasing rapidly, and that has to be now addressed very seriously in an effective manner by the government. Therefore, this particular scheme was launched, or this particular budgeting system was launched in India. Fine. That is what actually is the or the reasons behind the launch of outcome budgeting system in our country. Fine. Now you see, under outcome budgeting system, what is actually done? Now, see what is basically done in the budgeting system under outcome budgeting concept. as we have already understood that what we do, we list down the name of the items in one row, all right, or in one column basically. All right, so you list out the number of items that you needed to be purchased in a given financial year, and then you also list down the expected expenditure on that. Fine, so you also list down that expected expenditure upon that, and then you also have started including the objective or the purpose behind that expenditure. So you also start enlisting the purpose behind that expenditure. Fine. Now, under outcome budgeting, what you started doing, you also started listing the actual target to be achieved in a given financial year. Fine. For example, let me tell you how it has to be understood. मैं एक example आपको देता हूँ कैसे आपको समझना है. Suppose now there is an item that is called as rural development is one of the item, one of the you can say area where the money is to be spent. So of course, Ministry of Rural Development will receive the money for rural development purpose. Now for this, the money has been allocated rupees 1 lakh crore. Fine. Now the purpose of rural development exactly has been identified as that it has to decrease the level of inequality between urban and rural areas. That is the objective. Fine. Now to achieve this objective, what will you do here? How will you be able to reduce inequality? So you will have to list down those names. So you will, what you do, you will list down that, okay, in this financial year, let's say in 2021, 2022, I will be, or rather the Ministry of Rural Development will be able to construct the rural roads in 1 lakh villages. All right, that is one target. Then it is also going to have the rural electrification in 50,000 villages. Fine. Then let's say rural drinking water. Fine. So in 50,000 villages. Fine. So obviously, like this way, you will list down the target, and what you will do, you will also set a target to be achieved in this particular financial year. Fine. So the money that will be allocated to you, rupees 1 lakh crore, under the Ministry of Rural Development, the Ministry of Rural Development will have to ensure that these all developments are taking place or not. These all improvements are coming in reality or not. So what is that actual target? You will have to list down here. All right. And this is basically the concept of outcome budgeting. This is basically the concept of outcome budgeting. So what are you focusing upon? You are focusing upon the outcome. That is what we are going to do. We are going to improve the rural roads, rural electrification, rural drinking water. We are not focusing upon to increase or decrease the amount of expenditure, not upon the outlays, rather upon the outcome of that, upon the effectiveness of that money which is going to be spent in India under the particular budgetary allocation. ठीक है? So
Sir,
हाँ.
तो सर इसमें ऑब्जेक्टिव में these points will come rural electrification and drinking water.
Yes,
and then target में what मतलब पूरे साल में क्या क्या अचीव हो गया final result.
Yes, so in objective it will be coming like this way, that you will have to reduce inequality by improving rural roads, rural electrification, rural drinking water, and then in actual target it will be listing that 1 lakh villages will get the rural roads, 50,000 villages will get the electrification, 50,000 villages will get the drinking water in a given financial year, that is 2021, 2022. That's the target.
तो सर इसमें ऐसे नहीं होगा क्या मतलब आई डोंट नो आई एम गेटिंग अ लिटिल कंफ्यूज्ड कि पूरे ईयर के एंड में जो जो टारगेट्स अचीव हुए हैं
नहीं वैसे नहीं होगा.
Okay.
You will have to set a target before the year, before the financial year, and then you have to see whether you have achieved the target or not.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
All right. So that is outcome budgeting basically. Fine. So the idea is that you will have to set a target of whatever departments in which you are getting allocation of money before the financial year that begins, and then you have to achieve those targets so that it can be examined, it can be evaluated that 1 lakh villages were your target, but how many villages got the rural roads? You have to give the data. You have to present a record, you have to present a report before the parliament. All right. So that is how your, of course, efficiency or effectiveness both will be tested. Because what you have to understand that, as an example, I'm giving you that, of course, this budgeting system in India has been efficient. Fine, let's say performance budgeting system. It was efficient. There's no doubt about it. But it has never been so effective in terms of delivering the actual results on the ground. So now when you have a target set before you, you will be evaluated on that basis. If there would be no target, again, you will be having all freedom to, of course, manipulate the data, manipulate the records, and also manipulate your entire objectives also. All right. But under outcome budgeting, there will be a high degree of accountability upon you. There will be a high degree of responsibility upon you. And most importantly, it will also bring more and more transparency in the system, that exactly this was your promise, exactly this is how your money was allocated to you. Now, what you have done with this much of money, have you been able to achieve the target or not? If not, then where's the money? If not, then where is the money? So indirectly, you are going to be accountable to the Ministry of Finance and then consequently to the Parliament. All right. So that is how the things will become more and more. We'll be having more and more checks and balances, and probably with this, there will be less cases of corruption, less cases of the of course leakages of money in the system. All right, that is how the outcome budgeting concept actually was introduced. Fine. So therefore, outcome budgeting is understood to be more effective than any other budgeting system of India in the past. The performance budgeting system was more efficient but not so effective. All right. So just like an example, that Indian Army is definitely more and more efficient. I mean, of course, there's no doubt about the Army of India being efficient or not non-efficient. The point is that yes, they are efficient, but Indian Army's effectiveness will only be tested when India will be attacked, when there will be two frontal wars between India and Pakistan, India and China. Then only the Indian Army and their effectiveness will be tested. All right. So that's what actually is the point. Fine. So this is how we differentiate between efficiency and effectiveness. All right. Now, coming back to this issue, so outcome budgeting actually had been an idea of the then Finance Minister P. Chidambaram. Fine. So he brought this particular practice, of course, this particular concept into practice in India. And then afterwards, since 2004 till today, outcome budgeting has been the nature of budgeting system of India even till today. That's what actually is the point. Fine. Now, in outcome budgeting, you have certain advantages. You also have certain disadvantages. Now, obviously, advantages I have just listed in front of you, that it will bring more and more accountability upon the fund manager. Secondly, it will ensure more and more responsibility upon the fund manager. Third, it will also ensure more and more transparency in the system. Fourth, it will be target oriented concept or target oriented budgeting system, in which the delivery of public goods and public services would remain the focus of the budgeting system in India. All right. So of course, and at the end of the day, the public at large, the people at large, they are going to get the benefit out of the outcome budgeting system, because now the government and their departments and the ministries are going to be accountable in this outcome budgeting system on the floor of the parliament to the parliamentarians. Fine. That is how the system will bring more and more, of course, transparency, and then finally it will also strengthen the Indian democracy, the parliamentary democracy of India. That is how outcome budgeting system has had all the advantages in our country. Fine. And that's what actually we have just understood, that it was also an improvement upon the performance budgeting system in India. Fine. Because it has started focusing more upon the actual data, the actual target, and the actual achievement upon those target. Fine. That is how outcome budgeting has to be understood in the context of its positive contributions. Fine. But there are also limitations of outcome budgeting. There are also certain limitations of outcome budgeting. What is that? Say, the very big limitation of outcome budgeting is that outcome budgeting remained focused only upon the quantity. It could not emphasize upon the quality. All right. So outcome budgeting remained focused upon only upon quantity rather upon quality. Therefore, the outcome budgeting and its implementation, when it was evaluated after just a few years, it was realized that definitely in India, that what missed out in India, it was in the context of the quality of the delivery of public goods and public services in this country. For example, that under outcome budgeting, obviously many of these schemes became very targeted ones, such as Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan. Under outcome budgeting, schemes like midday meal became targeted ones. All right. So obviously, the Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan midday meal schemes became targeted one under outcome budgeting, that they will have to achieve a target of 10% enrollment or 100% enrollment in primary education, in primary schooling. So when it became a target under outcome budgeting, then what we realized, that yes, we got the 100% enrollment in the primary schooling, but a student of let's say standard second, a student of standard 5 can't read the book of standard 2 in India. So when it was realized under the survey of Pratham and NGO that a student of class 5 in the government schools, in the primary government schools, can't read the book of standard 2 in India, it exposed the entire education system of the country. That of course what we achieved, we only achieved the enrollment in the schools, but we could not continue the imparting of proper education among children in our schools. All right, due to the lack of course, infrastructure, lack of teachers, and also lack of motivation among the parents and the children to keep sending the schools on regular basis. All right, so these all fundamental factors or fundamental indicators, of course, indicate to us that we missed out the quality of the public service delivery in our country. That's not the only example. In the words of Professor Amartya Sen, even Professor Amartya Sen had also criticized the Indian budgeting system or Indian policy making system, especially in 2009-10, when he actually criticized in the context of that, yes, under the outcome budgeting system, the concept of National Rural Health Mission, that is NRHM, which was launched in the year 2005, had become very pervasive. It has been found that in every villages, almost in every villages, there has been a concept of primary health centers in India through the NRHM concept. So that was the target also of NRHM under the outcome budgeting. So under NRHM, when the target was to ensure, let's say, the 10% coverage of the villages through the primary health centers, of course, it achieved, but the quality of delivery of public health service in these PSCs remained abysmally very poor. It remained abysmally very poor because these PSCs were being run by the midwives, the of course the compounders, etc., not by the doctors, and even the so-called experts, surgeons, etc., have hardly been visiting to all these PSCs. They are basically extinct species in these PSCs. So obviously, this is what actually has been the remark or the observation made by Professor Amartya Sen about the Indian health system in 2019. So it again exposes that what happened to the PSCs or to the NRHM, that it remained focused only upon the opening of PSCs without even bothering upon how these PSCs are going to be run and who are going to run these PSCs in our villages. So exactly what we did, we opened schools, we opened PSCs, but without focusing upon quality of the delivery of public goods. All right. So through this, he also highlighted about the limitation of outcome budgeting. That's one thing. Then there are many programs, many schemes on which every time you can't count the outcome. You can't measure the outcome. So every outcome is not measurable. Every outcome is not measurable. For example, if under the Ministry of, let's say, Culture and Tourism, there is a program on which the cultural promotion has to be promoted, or there is a scheme on through which the cultural promotion has to be promoted, rather cultural promotion has to be ensured. Now the point is that how would you measure, that up to what degree there has been cultural promotion in India, a culture peaceful cultural harmonization promotion that has been done in India. So on what basis would you be able to measure cultural harmony in India? Is cultural harmony measurable? So obviously not. So there are many expenditures which you can't measure always in actual target, in measurable target. So therefore, when you have the expenditures which is essential, yet you can't actually measure them always in absolute digit or absolute figure, then definitely outcome budgeting will not be suitable for that. And this is one of those examples that I have quoted in front of you regarding the cultural promotion program. Similarly, there are many expenditures in offices. Let's say you have the government offices across the country, and in all those offices, there are various kinds of expenditures. One of the examples is, let's say, to purchase furniture, to purchase boxes, to purchase almiras. Now, how would you measure the performance of an almira? How would you measure the performance of a, let's say, chair and table? Now, of course, that also needs to be purchased and also needs to be supported through budgetary allocation only. So behind every expenditure, you can't actually have a measurable target. So therefore, this system was not at all applicable uniformly for every expenditure in India. Fine, that is one very serious criticism of outcome budgeting. Last but not the least, had outcome budgeting been so foolproof system to stop any possibility of leakages and a case of corruption, any possibility of leakages and case of corruption, then how come the CWG scam took place in India? That Commonwealth Games scam of 2010 took place in India. So now you see, under outcome budgeting, definitely the Ministry of Finance enjoys enormous power. How? Because in this system, there's an inbuilt mechanism that the Ministry of Finance will conduct a quarterly. Under outcome budgeting, Ministry of Finance is supposed to conduct a quarterly review of the expenditures allocated to different departments and ministries on the basis of their achievement of the actual target. So there's an inbuilt mechanism of quarterly review of the amount allocated for expenditure, the amount allocated for expenditure to achieve the actual target. Then if such is the case, then how come CWG scam took place in 2010 under the nose of the Ministry of Finance only? And CWG scam is openly available in front of us. All right. So now you see, I mean, the idea is this, that definitely this CWG, the Commonwealth Games, was conducted in Delhi under the direct command, direct control of the Delhi government and also the central government in Delhi. Now, had this scam took place, let's say, or taken place in the states like Chennai or in the state of Tamil Nadu or maybe Odisha, then perhaps the cases would have been understood. But since it was conducted, it was done also in Delhi. So obviously, the outcome budgeting failed here in ensuring the checks and balances so that the public money should not be wasted, should not get wasted in India. So in that context, only outcome budgeting also seemed to have failed in terms of its actual objective. All right. So with this critical examination of outcome budgeting, then we have to conclude. And conclusion is, therefore, despite its advantages, despite its benefits of outcome budgeting, the today's Indian budgeting system is not completely dependent upon outcome budgeting. Rather, it is a perfect blend of outcome and performance budgeting, which are implemented in India through every year's budgetary proposals. Through every year budgetary proposals. All right. And in 2005, women budgeting system was also introduced in India. In 2009, children budgeting system was also introduced in India. Now, under women budgeting system, the objective was to empower women economically, therefore, in every for every department or ministry, there should be a special allocation of the total fund for women empowerment in India. So a special allocation from the total fund, in fact, for the women empowerment activities in India. For example, let's say if 500 crore has been allocated for Ministry of Science and Technology, then out of this 500 crore, Ministry of Science and Technology has to allocate some percentage of money, that is somewhere around 10%, for the women empowerment purposes. So therefore, what the Science and Technology Department does, it promotes the female education, it promotes the women education in the field of science and technology. That is what we called as STEM program. That is science and technology, engineering and mathematics. So of course, this STEM program has today become quite famous, under which women specific funding is done for promotion of these subjects, science and technology, engineering subject, and mathematics among women in India. So that is what actually is being done. So that is how we have to understand the importance of women budgeting system also in India. Fine. And we have also created a separate fund that is called as Nirbhaya Fund. That is also called as Nirbhaya Fund for the women empowerment in India. So that is integral to the outcome budgeting system or overall the budgeting system of India. So women budgeting is presented along with the budgetary proposals in India. So there is no any separate budgeting. It is a part of overall budgeting system of India. That is women budgeting. Similarly, in 2009, for children empowerment, for safeguarding the interest of the children of India, a separate allocation of fund has also been directed by the Ministry of Finance to various departments and ministries to keep a separate fund for the empowerment of children in India. It was done under the RTE Act, that is Right to Education Act 2009. Under RTE, Right to Education Act 2009, in which the children between the age group of 6 to 14 years will enjoy fundamental right for receiving education. So that is how children budgeting system has to be understood. Fine. Is it clear to all of you? So now we can move to the next chapter. All right. So this chapter of public finance or the fiscal policy reform is now completed. Fine. So now we will be moving to the next chapter. The next chapter is on external sector policy reform. External sector policy reform. Fine. So what is this external sector policy reform? Just try to understand here. See, external sector policy reform, it simply means that we're talking about the Indian economy before 1991. And then after 1991, what was the reform that was done in Indian economy? See, the before 1991, the export and the import, they were highly regulated in India, highly controlled or regulated in India. So in the context of that, various laws were also enacted to support this regulation. Fine, various laws were also enacted to support this regulation. For example, let's say I told you about a law called FERA of 1973. Fine, that is Foreign Exchange Regulation Act. So FERA was one of those acts which used to control this particular export import in India. Fine, and then there was also a concept of the list that is called as canalized list in India. So items of import were put under the canalized list in India. So import was completely under the canalized list in India. And what do you mean by canalized list? Simply means the list of the government where the government is the only authorized importer. Government is the only authorized importer of those goods which are inserted into canalized list. So the goods which are inserted in the list, which is called as canalized list, simply indicates that it is only the government which is actually having the legitimate right to import such goods which are mentioned here. All right, for example, let's take an example, heavy machines, transformers, pharmaceuticals. So of course, these are all the items which are mentioned in the canalized list. All right, fertilizers. So these all items were put up under the canalized list. It simply means that no other agency except the government can import them. All right, and that is also done by the government-owned PSUs. The government-owned PSUs like MMTC and STC, Metals and Minerals Trading Corporation, State Trading Corporation, Metals and Minerals Trading Corporation, and State Trading Corporation. Now you see here that MMTC or STC, now these two were the government-owned PSUs which were authorized to import all the items which were mentioned in the canalized list. And almost every item, every other item, let's say like dye, printing machine, papers, etc. These all were under the part of canalized list. So obviously you can't import these items without going via the government route. Now, why was it done? It was done because here the government of India was following a policy of import substitution strategy. So government of India's foreign trade policy was based upon import substitution strategy. Under this, it has to discourage imports of goods in India. Now, why? Because of foreign exchange. So since there was less amount of foreign exchange available with the government of India, therefore it became a very precious, of course, asset for the government, and the government wanted to preserve it at any cost. Because this foreign exchange, the government wanted to preserve it because of the most essential imports in India. And those most essential imports in India were three F's, which we have discussed. What was three F's? Food, fuel,
Fertilizer.
fertilizers. So these three F's were such importing items without which India can't live. So these were the most essential items. To continue the import of these items, India needed sufficient amount of foreign exchange. Therefore, these items had to be discouraged because without this, India can go ahead, but not without these three items. And for these items, there was limited foreign exchange. So that's the reason why India was adopting or rather following import substitution strategy before 1991. Fine. So under this strategy, it actually backfired. It definitely backfired because anyhow, the three Fs import India could not stop. The import of three Fs India could not stop, and most importantly, that import of other items also India could not stop. And only the import of fuel and fertilizers used to comprise more than 70% of the foreign exchange being spent by the government of India. So that is the reason why precisely the government of India finally came under huge pressure, under huge stress. And then we see that by 1991, India was able to almost going on the verge of collapse. Now it actually has been only couple of years in the history of India when India had registered a positive balance of trade. See, balance of trade is basically an indicator of your total export minus total import of goods. So if your import is more than the value of export, then obviously your balance of trade will be always in negative. If you import more, export less, your BOT will be negative. Fine. So see, this BOT, which was a measurement of the import and export of merchandise goods, it was always in negative for India except 2 financial years. Except 2 financial years, it was always negative for India. In 1972, 73, it was positive. In 1980, 81, it was positive. But India could not leverage upon this positive BOT because this positive BOT was merely of few hundred crores, only 300 crores, 450 crores, like this way. So of course, this positive BOT was not giving any advantage to economy as such. All right, but this is true. You can say. I mean, of course, these are the silver lining in the dark clouds of India's BOT history. All right, so these, of course, so-called, I mean, advantage of India was easily lost due to various reasons. One of the reasons were basically the oil crisis in the world. So oil crisis in the world. So in 72, 73, due to the Yom Kippur War, Yom Kippur War that took place between Israel and Egypt. Now, of course, this Yom Kippur War that was fought in 73, because of that only the price of oil actually increased tremendously in global market. All right, so this Yom Kippur War was fought between Israel and Egypt on the issue of Palestine. Fine. So obviously, in this way, you can see the oil crisis actually took away the entire benefits of the BOT for India, and then again, India was, I mean, languishing on the front of suffering under the BOT crisis, and then also the balance of payment crisis attached to the BOT only. All right. So this is what actually was a problem in India under the external sector policy. Then after 1991, of course, this policy has to be changed. This import substitution strategy has to be changed. All right, this foreign trade policy will be now renewed. Fine, that's what actually we have to now understand. Now, see here, a foreign trade of any economy is largely measured upon or by two scales. Balance of trade, that gives us the information regarding the export and the import, the difference of export and import in the field of merchandise goods. All right. And it is not at all a sound indicator to rate any economy's foreign trade. So it is not so sound indicator, not a sound indicator to rate a country's foreign trade. Fine. So that is the limitation with the balance of trade. Therefore, the balance of payment is understood to be the most accurate indicator about a country's economic health upon the export import. So what is this balance of payment issue? Now see, this balance of payment issue is the balance between goods and services exported minus the goods and services imported. So goods and services imported and goods and services exported. So balance of this two is actually, it comes under the balance of payment concept. So therefore, it is an accurate indicator. Why? Because in BOT, the services are not included. But in BOP, services are also included. Fine. And BOP is then calculated on two scales, on two accounts. Current account and capital account. Current account measures the visibles and invisible items visibles like merchandise goods, invisibles like services, gifts, and also the money sent by the NRIs, PIOs to India, that is called as remittances. All right, so see here, services, gifts, money sent by the NRIs, PIOs to India to their near and dear ones, that is called as remittances. So this is also counted as a part of current account. This question has already been asked by UPSC. UPSC has already asked this question in 2015 prelims. The question was, remittances are counted in current account or capital account? So part of current account measurement. In many books, you will find it is also given in capital account. That is not correct. It is always a part of current account calculation. Fine. That is the BOP. So this is how BOP is measuring here. All right. So visible and invisible both. In capital account, it is the inflow and outflow of foreign capital. Inflow and outflow of foreign capital, such as FDI, FIIs, all right, QFIs, ADR, GDR, IDR, and even bonds. So FDI, that is foreign direct investment, FII, that is foreign institutional investors, QFI, that is qualified foreign investors, ADR, that is American depository receipts, GDR, that is global depository receipts, IDR, that is Indian depository receipts, and the bonds like masala bonds, which we discussed also yesterday. All right, so see, I mean, these are the foreign capitals that India gets. Fine. Now, in the foreign capital, also, what do we do? That is in capital account, what do? We also classify the capital account in two parts. That is debt account, non-debt account. Now, in the non-debt account, it is further classified as FDI and FPI. In the debt account, we have ADR, GDR, bonds, masala bonds, etc. So they are the debt account. Then also we have the ECBs. They are all debt account. We have non-debt account, that is FDI and FPI. Now you see, in the non-debt account, like FDI and FPI, that is also called as foreign portfolio investors. It is also called as foreign rentier investors. Fine. So now you see, I mean, this is how do we classify this foreign capital account altogether. So we have non-debt account, which simply means that money that we receive under the FDI, money that we receive under the FPI, they are not at all a debt upon the government. They are not at all a debt upon the government. A debt always owes liabilities, that you know. Debt always comes with liabilities. All right, you have to pay not only the principal amount but also the interest upon that, and that is a liability. You have to do it. That is debt. So these accounts, which include the FDI and FPI, are actually called as non-debt account, which means coming of FDI inside the country and FPI inside the country will not add any debt to the country. Fine. So therefore, every country in the world, they want more and more FDI and FPI to come to their country, including India. So China's rise is all due to the non-debt account, due to the entry of more and more FDI and FPI into Chinese economy. India has also been vying for having more and more entry of this particular foreign capital in the form of FDI and FPI in our country, because it will add no liabilities upon the state exchequer, upon the government to pay back. That is the reason why it is always solicited in a country like India. Now coming to the concept of FDI. What is FDI? See, foreign direct investment, as the name itself suggests you, it simply indicates there is a direct investment in our economy from the foreign side, from the foreign capital. So direct investment of foreign capital that takes place under the FDI. And when we say direct investment of foreign capital, it simply creates assets for the country through the FDI. Because this investment will come into the form of some assets, like some buildings will be constructed by this FDI. Some, let's say, some construction, some permanent operation will begin in India through this FDI. So they will add value in our total assets in our country. Fine. So it brings not only capital under FDI, but also technology under FDI. Also managerial expertise, managerial expertise in India through the FDIs. It also brings competition in Indian market through FDI. It also brings not only competition, rather it also ensures the quality of products in India through the FDI. All right, so it brings not only competition but also the quality of products improves, or rather gets improved in India through the FDI. It also brings new horizon or new markets. It also ensures new markets to be opened for the Indian made goods under FDI. So new markets for India or Indian goods and services will be opened through FDI. Because if Nokia will construct their, let's say, manufacturing unit in Chennai, so obviously it is going to be a headache of Nokia to find out the market not only inside the country but also in neighboring countries of India, like Southeast Asia. So Nokia will start also selling the products like mobile in the countries like Sri Lanka, in the countries like Bangladesh, in the countries like Myanmar, or maybe other countries of Southeast Asia. So it is not going to be a headache of the government of India to negotiate with the governments of Sri Lanka or the governments of Bangladesh, or so-called, let's say, Myanmar, to sell the product which is made from India. It is going to be a headache of the private company only to find out their potential buyers in these all markets. So that is always a good thing with the FDI. So once you get the FDI, these all are the advantages. You don't only receive the capital, which is very obvious under the FDI. You also receive technology. The technology is something which India is completely missing out. Technology is something where India is completely backward. All right. So definitely the world-class technologies are available in European, in, let's say, in some of the Asian and some of the American markets. So obviously, if there are investment coming from these countries in the form of FDI, they will also bring technologies in India. Fine. So for example, you see, let's say when you got the investment from McDonald's or KFC, or let's say any other food outlet. Now, when they brought their investment in India, they also brought some technologies in India. They started offering you an ice cream of a cone at the cost of ₹7 when they entered into Indian market. Today it is ₹20 that you get a cone of an ice cream from McD. But that is another technology that you will need to understand. The same cone that you were producing inside the country were of sub quality or poor quality, and that too with a high cost. So that's what actually you have to understand, that this is how they are bringing some new technologies also in the food processing marketing system. And exactly, they also bring the new managerial expertise, how to run a food outlets. How to run a food outlets. Of course, you can simply compare these McD's or KFC's with other food outlets in India. Because of that only, even Haldiram and other Indian brand of food outlets started providing you the world-class facilities of offering you the food and meals in their own outlets. Now you remember Haldiram was a company even 10, 20 years back. Haldiram is not a company of, let's say, last 20 years. It is a company also before 1991. But Haldiram was not offering you the world-class outlets to go and sit down there to have your meal and to have your, let's say, any other products to be consumed in Haldiram outlets. So it also has got improved due to the competition. So now Haldiram is being competed with, or rather it is receiving a competition from the world-class MNCs like McD's, KFC's, and other, in fact, food outlets. So if Haldiram will not provide you that facilities, Haldiram will completely be vanished. So see, this is how, when you get the best of the managerial capacity or expertise, you also improve competition in the market. And with this competition, finally, who are getting benefit? We as a consumer. Because in competition, consumers are always kings. So we will decide who is going to rule the food market of India, whether it is Haldiram or XYZ company. So that is how you see that competition is always advantageous for the consumers. All right, if there would not have been any competition, then the telecommunication business would have been highly costlier for the Indian consumers. You may be remembering that earlier, even for receiving a call, we used to pay money for that. All right, अगर आपको याद होगा तो कॉल रिसीव करने पे भी पैसा कटता था आपके अकाउंट से. Now today it is not. Of course, for 2 months, for more than 1 month, you pay a nominal charge, and then you can avail the services of any telecommunication company today. It is all due to competition. So you remove competition and you simply have a monopoly of one particular telecommunication company, then you see how they start exploiting the consumers. So therefore, monopoly is not at all good for the consumers, because then consumers are going to be exploited in the monopolistic system. So that is how it is an advantage to the FDI. Then you have also the best of the quality of products that is available, a range of products available in India. Now today you can see in electronics market, I mean, you have range of products available in India. You can't even imagine 20 years back to, let's say, purchase the best model of, let's say, television at the cost of rupees 10,000, 15,000 rupees in India. All right. So today it is possible. It is all due to the competition and having the improved quality of products available for the consumers in India. So say these are the advantages of the FDI. Fine. FDI used to come to India through two routes. Mumbai and Delhi. See, Mumbai route and Delhi routes were the two routes of FDI coming to India. Fine. Simply means Mumbai route was an automatic route of receiving FDI in India. There was it was a government approved route to receive FDI in India. Mumbai route is controlled by the RBI. Delhi route was controlled by the FIPB, which was inside the Ministry of Finance, that is Foreign Investment Promotion Board. Foreign Investment Promotion Board, FIPB, under the Ministry of Finance. So earlier, what used to happen, see, FDI policy was designed by the DIPP, that is Department of Industrial Policy and Promotion. FDI policy was designed in India by DIPP, Department of Industries, Industrial Policies and Promotion. All right, that is DIPP under the Ministry of Industry and Commerce. So Ministry of Industry and Commerce used to design the FDI policy in India. And then afterwards, the RBI and FIPB had to play its role. So under the FDI policy, government used to announce, or DIPP used to announce, that which sector FDI will come under automatic route and which sector of FDI will come under the government approved route. For example, let me tell you, insurance sector. So insurance sector, the government are announced to have, let's say, FDI up to, let's say, 49% through the automatic route. Fine. So in other words, the FDI, let's say I give an example to understand clearly. So you have the company like Apollo Munich providing you insurance coverage. Fine. The Apollo is an Indian based company. Munich is Germany based company. Now, under the FDI of insurance, 49%, Munich could invest up to 49% of capital in Apollo Munich insurance market. And they can simply bring their capital inside India, or they can give this capital to Apollo company to run the business, to start the business. All right. And here, since it is automatic, so they had to only inform RBI within 30 days of bringing capital inside Indian economy. तो मतलब साफ साफ है कि अपोलो के अकाउंट में म्यूनिक ने पैसा ट्रांसफर कर दिया, ऑलराइट, और पैसा जो ट्रांसफर हो गया म्यूनिक के अकाउंट में, ऑफ कोर्स उसके बारे में आरबीआई को 30 दिन के अंदर इंफॉर्मेशन पहुंचा देना है दोनों कंपनियों को. दैट इज ऑटोमेटिक रूट. फाइन. नाउ यू सी another sector, it's a defense. Now defense, under defense there was an FDI of 24%, 26% allowed in India, but through government approved route. So any defense company, let's say Boeing. Now Boeing makes aircraft also, Boeing also makes the fighter jets as well. So Boeing has to invest money in any Indian based company which is also interested in making the defense equipment. They can bring only 26% of capital into that. But before bringing or before investing the money, let's say if Boeing is going to construct a aircraft along with, take an example, let's say Reliance. So of course, when they bring their capital 26% of the total asset of a company, then Boeing will have to first of all take the permission from the government route, that is FIPB. So they will have to take a permission, then only they can bring the investment and they can give it to Reliance for the purpose of, let's say, construction of military jet aircraft. Now this is how FDI was allowed in India. Now, in last couple of years, this entire concept has been changed by this government. Today, the government, in fact, 2019 budget, in 2019 budget, the government had removed this route altogether. So now we don't have FIPB. we have only one route, that is RBI automatic route. So today FDI policy of India in fact has become one of the most liberal FDI policies in the world. And this is precisely the reason that why India's rating on ease of doing business index has improved drastically. All right, because see, I mean, this sort of reforms had not been done in the past by any of the government. But this government has completely abolished this control of the government over the FDI. Now, only thing you have to do is that you bring the investment and you have to inform after bringing the investment within 30 days to RBI. That's it. That is all the FDI that is coming to India now. It is under the automatic route. That is the point. All right, it is under the automatic route, and here RBI is only acting as a moot spectator. RBI can't stop or can't allow the entry and exit of the FDI, but RBI can only report it that this much of money has come to India in the form of FDI. And there was slight confusion regarding the FDI in India, which also got clarified. When Arvind Mayaram committee was constituted. Arvind Mayaram committee, 2013. Now there was a confusion in India regarding what to be called as FDI, what not to be called as FDI. See, I just told you that FDI will come in the form of direct investment, and it has to be in the form of foreign capital largely. Foreign capital like, let's say, dollar, pound, isn't it? Yen, yuan, like this way. This is a foreign capital which can come to India. All right. So obviously, I mean, this is the foreign capital we normally understand through the concept of FDI. But not in every case we receive foreign capital like this way under FDI. In certain cases, even in the form of shares, the money is invested in the Indian market. And any share that is in one go by one entity in one enterprise above 10% or 10 and above percent, so above 10% share coming in one lot from one person in one company, that will be counted as FDI. Less than that will be counted as FII, not FDI. So 10% and above investment coming also through the shares in a company should be understood as FDI only. Is it clear? So Arvind Mayaram committee for the first time clarified it. Before this, it used to be big confusion among the not only policy makers but also among the readers, among the learners, that what should be called as FDI should not be called as FDI. It was always a discretion of the government. But now, after having this committee's recommendation, which was also accepted by the government, in fact, it became clear that any investment that is also coming in the form of shares, that too in one lot above 10 and 10% and above, it should be considered as FDI, because FDI always indicates a permanent form of investment. FDI always indicates a permanent form of investment, whereas FPI is just like a hot money. All right. So FPI is just like a hot money. It can move out from a country immediately, overnight. You can't do anything on that. But FDI can't move out from a country overnight. It will remain in a country for a substantial period of time. All right. For example, FDI can come in the form of a company or trust or any registered firm. So the moment you have opened a company or trust or registered firm, you can't close it overnight. You can't close it overnight. There's a process of closure. You can't run away from India overnight. That is the advantage of FDI. So therefore, every country wants more and more FDI, because FDI will come with the capital and it will improve your infrastructure. It will construct new buildings, new assets or new roads, new bridges, etc. So therefore, everyone wants to have more and more FDI, including India as well, including America also. All right, that is the advantage of FDI that we have just discussed. Is it clear to you? Now let us understand FPI, foreign portfolio or rentier investment or investors. See here. Foreign portfolio investment, FPI. FPI is a big term which includes various other kinds of investments like FIIs, QFIs. Then you have sub account of NRIs. All right. And any other investment in the share market. So earlier we used to have these words separately. We are using FII, QFI separately, because FII used to come in India earlier only from the Western countries largely. Western countries like Europe and America largely. All right. That was a source of revenue for the government of India and the FIIs. Whereas qualified foreign investors, they actually got the focus of the government only from 2008-9. And they were mainly from the investors from the Gulf countries. Now, why Gulf countries? Because in 2008 there was a US mortgage crisis. There was US mortgage crisis in 2008, and because of that, investment in India gone sharply down. The US mortgage crisis, it was a crisis that took place in America, where the many of the companies became defaulters. The companies in America became defaulters of the bank loans. All right, they failed, in fact. Because of that, the banks were in the crisis in America. And because of this, entire Europe got under the crisis. So this US mortgage crisis also has had an impact upon India in terms of very less amount of investment coming from the FIIs. Therefore, the government of India started promoting the investment from the Gulf nations, because in Gulf nations, countries like UAE, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, here India was having a huge number of Indian diaspora. Now, this Indian diaspora could have invested in the Indian market. That's why India gave a specific indication to these particular investors in the form of qualified foreign investors. But by 2011, these two concepts were merged together. And in 2014, the FPI and FII were merged together. All right, so FPI and FIIs were also merged together. And then what was done? That now we use only FII on the place of FPI. Fine. So we have FIIs that are being used in India in terms of FPI. So FPI, FII both are now same in India. It includes not only the investors from Europe but also investors from Gulf countries and other, of course, countries as well in Indian market. Fine. So now you see what is this FII? We have to understand that in fact. Foreign institutional investors. Just try to understand it. What does it mean? See, I mean, you have to understand it like this way. I mean, if you have to talk about the Indian market, so if you have to understand the Indian market, what you have to simply understand that uh, we have investment coming from different parts of the world, especially I'm talking about the USA. So USA's investors are interested in investing in Indian market. Fine. And what is basically done? See, we have various share markets in India. I'm simply giving you these few examples of share market like National Stock Exchange. Let's say the Bombay Stock Exchange. So National Stock Exchange, of course, that is the biggest stock exchange of India. And Bombay Stock Exchange is the oldest stock exchange of India. Fine. So in terms of the total shares that is transacted, the NSE is the biggest one and BSE is the oldest one in India, in Bombay. So of course they are interested in investing in the share markets in India. Fine. Now the share markets in India is controlled by an institution called SEBI. SEBI is sitting here in New Delhi, headquarters is New Delhi. SEBI is controlling everything regarding the share market in India now. The permissible level of investments in India under the SEBI's regulation, it comes from only the FIIs. And what is FII? FIIs are the registered companies in America or in any other parts of the world. They are registered here as a company here in America. I give you some real example to understand it very clearly. Let's say you may have heard about Morgan Stanley, or you may have also heard about Merrill Lynch. You also may have heard about Standard and Poor. Now see, these are the American-based FIIs. These are the biggest FIIs of the world. Their net assets are more than the assets of the countries like Pakistan, Nepal, or Bhutan. So you can now understand that they stand a very huge influence upon any global economy because that is their total assets. Fine. So in this way, they also have a huge presence or huge dominance in American market. So they are the registered FIIs in America or in American economy. Now these registered FIIs are permitted by SEBIs to invest in the NSEs or in the BSEs or any other stock exchange of India. So now you see only registered FIIs who also have to get registered with the SEBI, they are eligible to transact in these all share markets in India. तो इनको करना क्या होता है कि they have to file a registration form with the SEBI. All right, and then they are allowed to transact, purchase and sell the shares in these all markets in India. That is basically FII. Now you see these FIIs, or along with these FIIs, there are also many retail investors in India. Sorry, in America. Let's say the Americans or maybe the Indian Americans in America. This example is Indian Americans in America. Now they are the retail investors. Now say the Indian Americans who have, of course, who have, exited the citizenship of India, who have become the permanent citizen of America, maybe of Canada. Now they are also interested in Indian market, and they have also a huge capital with them. So they also want to diversify their capital, their investments. So what are they doing? Another, what are they interested for? They are also interested to invest in India's stocks or India's shares. But theoretically, they can't do it. As a retail investor who are settled down in overseas market or overseas country, they cannot do it. We can do it. Me and you can do it because we are still the Indian citizens. But they can't do it because they have lost their citizenship from India, or they have quitted their citizenship from India. But they can't invest directly in these all markets. But they are still interested in investing in these markets. So what will they do? They go and contact them, the Standard and Poor. They go and contact them, Merrill Lynch. They go and contact them, Morgan Stanley. Fine. So these investors, they receive money from retail investors based in America and other European markets. Through a concept of P notes that is called as participatory notes. P notes. So P notes, that is called as participatory notes. The retail investors in overseas markets invest in the India's share market through the P notes mechanism. All right. This P notes is basically a contract between the FIIs in overseas market and retail investors in overseas market. It's just like a contract of these FIIs. These are the FIIs. The example I've quoted here, they're retail investors. So retail investors, they give their money to these companies, and these companies promise them a good return, a high return. All right. So if you, let's say, invest $1, they will pay you $5. So that is what they promise to their investors. They invest, let's say, $1 million in Morgan Stanley, and Morgan Stanley had make a promise to them that they will give you $5 million after 1 year. So what Morgan Stanley does, Morgan Stanley receives the money from them, and then they again come to India and they invest in the Bombay Stock Exchange and purchase the shares of Indian companies. All right, I got your point. Let's say Reliance. So Reliance company shares are purchased by Morgan Stanley with 500 million US dollar investment. Fine. So this is how P notes mechanism also facilitate the investment in India through FIIs. Fine. But this SEBI is not knowing who are these real investors. So what SEBI did in 2011, SEBI made KYC norms compulsory for P notes investors in India. KYC norm, that is know your customer. All right, because this FIIs used to only put up a data before SEBI that out of $500 million, $200 million has come from participatory notes. All right, 200 million has come through the participatory notes. Now SEBI was not knowing that who are these participatory notes purchasers. They could be Dawood Ibrahim also. They could be Nirav Modi also. They could be Vijay Mallya also. Now these are all elements which India has been looking for. All right, so now you see in this situation what is possible, that even the anti-Indian elements can invest huge money in India, and overnight they can withdraw the money just to destabilize India's share market. तो इससे क्या होगा कि इंडिया का शेयर मार्केट फ्लॉप कर जाएगा, रातों रात गिर जाएगा पूरा शेयर, इकोनॉमी ध्वस्त हो जाएगा. So that will be called as economy warfare against India. So what SEBI did, SEBI made it compulsory to have KYC norms of all these retail investors which are investing through the participatory notes. Now this question has been asked by UPSC in this year's prelims, last year's prelims. Question was asked that what is participatory notes? If you see the question paper, you will find this as a question that had already been asked by UPSC last year in prelims only. Fine. So this is the concept of participatory notes. Very few people know about it. Let me tell you one thing. I can bet upon that you can ask your friend whether they know about it or not. They will not be able to explain it like this way. Because in no book this is given like this way. Not a single book. All right, but that is the mechanism through which you get the investment under FII, that too FII under P notes. So today you have got to know about the FII P notes mechanism of investment in India. So participatory notes is also one of the instruments through which foreign investments are invited in India, or it comes to India. Today KYC norm has been made, in fact 2011 when it was made mandatory, compulsory, there was a dip in the P notes investment in India, because earlier out of 100% of FII investments, 46% of total investment was coming from P notes. 46, almost half. When the government, when the SEBI made it compulsory, it slipped down to 30%. So today also it is around 30-32% money that comes to India under FII. It comes through the P notes mechanism. लेकिन उसमें 46-47% होता था. So that is the reason why there was a fear, or there was a concern that it might have also the hawala money being sent back to India through this P notes mechanism. Illegal transaction could have also been responsible in the rise of P notes investment in India. All right. So this practice increased tremendously, and that is the reason why it had to be stopped. Fine, and that is how the things were then controlled by India to larger extent, in fact. But अभी भी बहुत सारे problems हैं, ठीक है? We will discuss in next class. So आज इतना ही रखते हैं, ठीक है? Next class I'll take next week, in fact, from Monday. Tomorrow you will be having off, all right. Day after tomorrow you will be having your session with Nikhil sir on geography, then Kanik sir on polity, and in this week you have to write the papers also. Prelims mains दोनों का इकोनॉमी खत्म करना है इसी वीक में आपको, ठीक है? एंड फिर मंडे से हम लोग तकरीबन 2 चैप्टर इसके बाद बचेगा और इसको भी कंक्लूड करना है. वन मोर क्लास विल रिक्वायर टू कंक्लूड इट, ठीक है? So from Monday we'll be completing it, and then by the next week only this economy will be over, in fact. ठीक है? फिर उसके बाद कुछ गैप के बाद I will take the classes of economic survey and budget also. ठीक है? That's the plan. All right. So with this I'm now signing it off. All right, and again I'll see you next Monday. Fine. ठीक है? चलिए फिर, bye bye. Take care.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Bye. Yes. Over.